Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy 2012, the year the world did not end. And I just wanted to comment on the signing of the National Defense Authorization Act by President Barry Soetoro, aka Obama, and the signing statement which accompanied it. And of course, we need to remember that during his campaign for presidency, he decried President Bush's use of signing statements and said that he was against the idea. But of course, he has used them, which makes him a lying liar. So anything that is in the signing statement should be completely ignored because it absolutely is meaningless. And of course now we have the provision in there that allows for the indefinite military detention of American citizens on American soil based on a determination that is completely vague and arbitrary. And of course he has decried the limitations that are in the NDAA against the unlimited executive power which he wants to have in the way he handles terrorist suspects. Which all of this is just smoke and mirrors. And of course it comes down to this. What we see with this is the same sort of ex post facto laws that we have constantly being made in this country, which are supposedly anti-constitutional and should not be legal, but of course are, because the Constitution is meaningless. In fact, the only reason this is being put into law right now is it's given the color of law and legality after the fact, which what I'm saying is that there have already been arrest and detention of American citizens in the United States, indefinitely detained by the military, and this is only a formalizing of it onto paper. And that's all we ever get. And it's more of the same. Yes, it's a horrible, rotten provision. It is a stinking, crying shame. And in any government that was actually run by a constitution or the rule of law, it would be shameful and disgraceful for anybody to even propose such a thing. But again, this is what we have because you do not have any constitutional protection. The law only applies to you whenever the powers that be wish it to. And if they decide to follow the Constitution, all well and good. If they don't, they don't. And there's nothing you can do about it. If you try to file a claim in any court basing your complaint on the Constitution, you will find very quickly that you have no standing. That's because the Constitution was not written for you. It was only written for the landed gentry of the time and still applies to that group of people today, which includes corporations as well. So it's kind of bizarre that we have a Constitution that will protect artificial entities, but that does not protect actual living people. And that's the facts of it. It's pure and simple. All we have here in this nation is a corporate plantation. And it's only a matter of time before that is formalized into writing and made into fact for all to see on paper. And all you have to do is look around and see how there's a flouting of individual liberties, and there is the overreach and expression of corporate power in this country over and over and over again that is not addressed and is not put into check in any kind of way, shape, or form. Fracking is a good example of this. You see that there is some evidence coming out that fracking causes earthquakes, albeit small ones, so far anyway. And that, of course, that does not even address the idea of the amazing array of chemicals that are inside the water that they use for this purpose, which causes some people's tap water to become flammable, and who knows what kind of cancer it's going to cause in the long term. But of course, this is going full steam ahead in many states, including my own here in Pennsylvania. And absolutely, apparently no limits and no restrictions being placed on these companies from going about their business. And that just goes to show you that what we live in is a corporate plantation. And when I see the NDAA, it doesn't cause me any greater concern than what I had before, because all we have is a formalizing on paper of a practice that has already been going on. And that is to say that we have already had indefinite detention of U.S. citizens by the military and other governmental agencies picked up on United States soil and held indefinitely without access to due process. This has already been going on. And that's why we just have the color of law applied to it now. It's only a matter of time before the corporate dominance agenda of this corporate plantation that we call the United States is made, quote unquote, official by putting it onto paper. And while I do decry the overreach and the crushing of civil liberties by an authoritarian federal government, the one thing that I think it's important for people to understand is that the federal government is not acting like an entity of its own accord. There is a group behind the federal government which decides what and when it does anything that it does. And that is the moneyed interests, the corporate elite, Wall Street, the City of London, probably even the Vatican, the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank, and all the international bankers and multinational corporations. They're the ones that decide what the government does. They're the people, the real power behind the scenes. The federal government doesn't do anything as a monolithic federal government. It's not crushing your civil liberties for the benefit of what? What does the federal government as an entity gain by doing any of this? Any of the things that they do is for the benefit of the powers behind the scenes. And that's multinational corporations and international finance. It's plain for anybody to see. And where you see a push by certain people to dismantle all federal regulations, to allow these corporate behemoths to run rampant and free, totally unrestrained, it's just a reflection of the fact that the idea about the federal government and what it represents is completely controlled, owned, lock, stock, and barrel by wealthy elitists and corporate interests. That's how they can decide what laws to pass and what laws not to pass. That's how they can decide that marijuana should be illegal because they make more money off of it by selling it on the black market than they would if it was legal. And of course that money is all unaccounted for. And of course, where is this money handled? Through the international black market running of illegal drugs. Well, it's all funneled through Wall Street and the City of London and the European Central Bank and the financial industry, which stands to gain by the black budget money that is laundered through them on the sale of illegal drugs. And it's the same corporate interest that has so much money invested into the pharmaceutical industry, which has, you know, all these drugs that are declared safe and quote-unquote effective pharmaceutical agents, which kill hundreds of thousands of people every year, are sold and pushed on people. And who stands to benefit from this? The federal government, as an entity, doesn't get anything out of that. The pharmaceutical industry does. So who is controlling who? Is the pharmaceutical industry controlling the federal government, or is the federal government controlling the pharmaceutical industry? You see the point I'm trying to make? Yeah, the federal government is a crushing burden on a lot of people when it comes to invading our civil liberties and destroying whatever so-called gloss of law that we have on us on any given day. But the federal government as an entity is nothing. It's nothing. It is the people behind the federal government which are the problem. And that is the moneyed elite and the corporate interests. Those are the things that we have to fight against. And maybe in 2012 we will have a renewed focus from Occupy Wall Street and maybe some other groups as well. Hopefully none of them will sell out either to the left or to the right, and they'll remain focused on whatever is an important issue for them. You know, getting back some segment of what makes a society good and decent and pulling it out of the hands of corporate control. And maybe doing something to try and get corporate and financial interests out of controlling the government of this country so that it will eventually serve the interests of the people, which it's supposed to do in theory, but it never has done in fact. So That's why when I look at the NDAA and the provisions that are in there, as egregious as they are merely meant to serve the interests of corporate power brokers at some point down the road. And that's how all of these things come into being. That's why you have ALEC, A-L-E-C, the group that actually writes the laws, which is actually run by corporate special interest groups. They write the laws in such a way that down the road they can take advantage of it in some capacity, whether it's politically or financially or whatever. And all of these encroachments on civil liberties are just a way in which corporate domination of you, by making you a serf somewhere down the road, working on your local lord's plantation at his whim and pleasure, just like in feudal days, that will be perfectly acceptable down the road, because as your civil liberties are eroded, then when a corporation comes in and buys your town, buys your roads, buys your all of the things that are supposedly part of a society, that a community that you get the benefits of by virtue of your taxation and all the other things that go along with the government, society, and community. Whenever a corporation comes in and owns all of that, you'll have to pay a fee to leave your house, to use a particular appliance, to to use your water, to pay for your school, to pay for your local fire department, to pay for the mercenary police, which will be private contractors in the future, to pay for everything. So that if you think that your burden of taxation is bad now with a quote-unquote burdensome federal government, imagine how much more you're going to pay whenever you have to actually pay to use your own street. You have to pay to send your kid to school. You have to pay for every access and usage of everything that you now take for granted by virtue of your taxation. And every road's a toll road. And you have to pay the fire department to come and put your house out when it's burning. And you have to pay the police department to come and protect you against being robbed or murdered, or to even investigate a crime. This is what everything is being set up for. And when I hear people talk about fighting the New World Order, it's too late. The New World Order is here now, with interlocking free trade agreements and the gradual lowering of the bar of all workers around the world to the lowest common denominator. You already have it here. It's a financial New World Order, and it's already in place. Okay? It's already in place. That's why you have the Federal Reserve bailing out banks in Europe, because all of this stuff is already interlocked and in place. It serves no purpose anymore, I don't think. I mean, I used to think that a political union was necessary, but it's not anymore. Political union now is superfluous. It's not necessary. They could devote their resources to other things now. They don't need to go for political union because they already have these interlocking free trade agreements. What's to be done? What can you fight for in the future? Well, hopefully we will see continued protest movements and people that have very specific demands that they want to achieve. And maybe with a large enough group of people being involved, some segments of corporate dominance can be removed not only from the government but also from our lives. And we can retain a certain sense of community, and perhaps we can move towards that in our own personal lives as well, by getting to know our neighbors, by deciding that we are going to protect each other, all of our friends, all of our neighbors, and all of the people that we know and love, that we are going to do what we can to make sure that people that we know and care about have the things that they need and provide for them, because there damn sure is not going to be anybody else that's going to step up to the plate. And when it comes time to protest against various things that are egregious and onerous that are being put upon us by the powers behind the federal government, the international monetary elite, and the multinational corporations, perhaps we will take steps to fight against that. And hopefully 2012 will be a time of change in this country. It will be a time of change around the world where people will actually come together of various different political ideologies. I don't care if you're, if you hold certain political points of view which are different from me. If we are united in common cause, in bringing about true community, in arresting corporate control away from the government and away from our communities and away from us as individuals, then I'll gladly team up with you, even if you hold completely different political views from me. And hopefully it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Asian, or American Indian, or Native Americans, if you prefer that term. What difference does it make if we're all united in a common cause? And I still believe that what we're fighting against is the international financial syndicate that runs everything. They're the powers behind the federal government. They're the powers that are slowly seeping into state governments as well via ALEC, the corporate-dominated quote-unquote think tank, which writes all of these laws that are passed on the state level. So you see, I still think we have the same enemy here. That enemy is the one that is causing the federal government to pass the laws ex post facto to give the color of law to things that are going to have meaning and purpose down the road. When corporations own you directly on paper, it will have already been made legal on paper by the federal government under the control of the corporations, who now direct and use the federal government for their own purposes. Just look at how war works. War is for the direct benefit of industrialists and financial elites and the oil companies. Everything that is gained in any war is for the benefit of corporations. It's not spreading democracy. It's not making life easier for people who live under onerous dictatorships. It's only about gathering everybody together into this network of free trade and financial interlocking agreements, so that the entire world is a web that is controlled by the international elitists. Political union is unnecessary, and it doesn't matter what kind of government you have. If you have international finance controlling the government of Canada and you have international finance controlling the government of the United States, why do you need a political union? You have the same controlling entity behind them. You see, that's the point I'm trying to make. The New World Order is already here, and the only way to actually fight it is to fight the actual cause where the actual power resides. And that is the people that actually control the government, corporations and international finance. So that's still my focus, and that's my hope, that people will understand this basic and simple point of view. You do not have any rights except privileges that someone decides to let you have on any given day, and it's totally arbitrary whether or not you actually have them. And the only way we can actually fight for any kind of recognition for actual living human beings is if we finally decide that me and you, whether I agree with you or not, if we can both agree that that thing over there is no good, then we need to come together and decide that we have to fight that in whatever way we can, in order to try and make our communities and our lives better for everybody. Me and you and all the people you know and love. And that's still my focus. Thank you. Good day.